So have you ever done a choose your own adventure keynote? Because I have. And I was thinking about it this week because last week I had the good fortune of working on a couple of virtual events. One I was a presenter at, and another I was the producer. And that's the one where I was reminded that not everybody knows the PowerPoint tips that I know. And I'm sure they know tips I don't know. But the one that came up for our situation last week was we were prepping for this person's session, and they were talking about they might have a little extra content, they might want to skip through a section. And I don't know about you, but I don't like when speakers just click through a bunch of slides and you know they don't talk about them, because I guess I'm a little biased. I don't know, from presenting, and I know how hard it is to get the timing right. And I'm always looking for tips to make it seamless if I need to change course a little bit. We'll get to the choose your own adventure where I'm intentionally changing course in just a second. But I think this is a really good tip because this speaker didn't know about it. And if they don't know about it, maybe you don't either. But if you are presenting in PowerPoint and you want to skip from one slide to another, all you have to do is press the slide number you want to go to, type the slide number you want to go to, and press enter. And it will magically move you to the slide you selected. So if you know that there's a section that you might want to skip over, it's a good idea ahead of time to kind of make note of what the slide is that might be where you would want to jump to. And that way, if you do have to fast forward and skip parts, you can just seamlessly do that, because it'll look just like all the other slide transitions of going from this slide to that slide if you just type the slide number and press enter. So just a little tip, if you already knew it, hey, sorry, you can I should have warned you and you could have fast forwarded through that part. But here's some other parts that you might not have thought about. So again, I would call that sort of we'll call that the basic level. So as you know, I like to look for how we can level it up. So the next step up, I would suggest, aside from being able to just seamlessly move through your presentation and jump around, it's great for meetings too. If you know you have certain slides that people may want to dig into a little deeper, they may have questions about, maybe it's a process chart or some kind of graph or something. I always make note of what slide number it is so that I can quickly go back to that slide if somebody says, oh, can we go back and look at that thing? Again, these little things can make a big difference just in the experience. And it just makes you look more magical when things just magically happen like that. So what I also suggest in sort of that same vein, sometimes you have presentations that you need to adjust the length of. And so maybe there's a section that sometimes you don't use. Like I know if I'm doing a 30-minute session, I can take this part out. And if it's a 45-minute session, I can leave that section in. And in PowerPoint, you can, of course, do custom slideshows, but then you still have to kind of decide ahead of time if you're going to use those slides or not, to pick which custom show. But what you could do is you could have your core group of slides. Let's say it's 20 slides. I like even numbers so I can do this in my head more easily. So let's say there's 20 slides that you know you're going to be using, and you have an additional topic or two or whatever that you might want to get into. Like maybe it's if it's a training, it's like kind of a hard concept, and you might need a different example if they're not quite getting it from the first example that you have in your presentation. Or it's a subject that you think people might have some questions about and might want to dig deeper into, but you don't want to put that in your core presentation. You want to get through that content and then go to it later. You could actually put that batch of slides at the end of your presentation. So after the last slide, where you could just run the presentation and get to the last slide and say, thank you very much. Or you could, at any point in your presentation, go and grab those slides. Again, let's say we had 20 slides in our presentation. I know that my extra content starts at slide 21. So wherever I am in my presentation, I'm going along and I'm at slide 12 and people have some questions or they're not getting the concept and I want to bring in that other content, I can quickly type in 21, press enter, go to that latter part of the content, go through those slides if I need to, and then press 13 because that would have been the next slide after 12 if I had just been running the presentation. And then I hop right back there and it's like it all was meant to be that way from the beginning. So again, takes a little practice. You do have to have yourself a little cheat sheet or, some way to easily know what the slide numbers are that you're hopping to and from. But once you get the hang of it, it really can make for a smoother transition and avoid that like, oh, fast forward, click, 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 click. Let's skip these slides, which again, in some cases, depending on the rest of the presentation, that can show a sense of that you weren't quite prepared. You didn't have your timing down very well, especially if it's like a lot of slides you got to go through. So these are things that you're going to start to notice as you are presenting. And this is just a little fix if you find that you have that problem. And you're kind of running over sometimes. If there's places you can safely jump to without disturbing the flow of the presentation, then this might be the solution for you. Now, the final level, let's say that was the medium, that was middle, that was sort of the middle level. Let's say advanced level, what I started out with, I said, you could do a choose your own adventure presentation. And I say this from personal experience, it is not for the faint of heart. You have to really commit to, it's like, yeah, like commit to the, to the concept, but it's really not as hard as it sounds. You do have to be super prepared. You have to be very comfortable with the content because you are going to be moving around and not doing it in just a straight linear fashion like you normally would do a presentation. So I'll give you an example. One I did a few years back. This was a virtual, and you could do this live, but this was a virtual situation. I'll explain the one thing you have to change if you're doing it live. And the whole point of the whole sort of structure of the presentation was that I was taking you on a journey. We were kind of talking about how we got from point A to point B in this experience. So what I did was, and I actually had a map, and so I started the presentation, and we were on like a little road trip, and we got to the first sort of roadside attraction or exit point or whatever you want to call it. It had that sort of narrative to it that we were on a road trip. And when we got there, we had the little sort of like location sign, now entering, whatever the topic was. And I talked about that topic, but I set it up and I was like, well, as we go along in our journey, you're going to get to decide the path that we take. So I discussed the first topic and then we continued on down the road, so to speak, in the presentation, and we got to the next exit point, and they had two choices. They could go one direction or the other. They voted. So it wasn't each person got to choose their own adventure. It was collectively the group got to choose the adventure. So they voted. They picked topic A or topic B. Once they picked their topic, that was the topic that I discussed. And the other topic was just bypassed because that's what would happen if you were on a road trip. So I discussed that topic and then continued on through the presentation and got to the next off ramp. And in this case, they had three choices. Topic A, topic B, topic C. Again, each one had its little road sign and whatever. They voted, whichever one they picked. That was the one that I discussed. And then we got to the end of the presentation. And it all just flowed right along. But here's what's really interesting and what was perhaps a little different and what I was actually hoping would happen was when the presentation was over, I had a number of people in the chat and later afterwards reach out to me and they're like, wow, we really want to know what would have happened if we picked the other exit. Because think about it, the first one I said I picked, the first one was just the topic to kind of get us started. But they had 5 possible topics because they had 2 in the first exit pathway and they had 3 in the second exit pathway. So they had 5 possible topics that I could talk about during the keynote, but I only talked about 2 of them. Didn't talk about the other 3. And of course, this was subject matter that allowed for that. That like the story made sense. If they only picked the 2, they didn't miss out on anything. They still could have a good experience, but they only heard 2 of the 5 possible stories. So, what I had done though ahead of time was I had pre-recorded all 5 stories. So, if people wanted to, they could go back. And this is something to really think about because so often we do a training or we do a keynote or we do some type of event, and you get what you got at the at the event, and there's not really a follow-up. There's not sort of that replay value, let's say, of the session. But in this way, they could go back and they could watch the video for the topics that they missed. And maybe they were only interested in one of them or 2 of them, and that's fine. They didn't have to watch them all. But in that way, again, it kept that idea of they got to choose what was important to them. And it also just continued the conversation because it wasn't just, thank you very much, that was a nice keynote, next speaker. This way, they had some additional things that were coming for them later. So again, does require a different level of preparation, both in terms of if you want to have that additional content, and it didn't have to be pre-recorded videos. I've done it where it's just a handout, and so they got the key topics in a handout maybe. So how you handle those additional topics, that is entirely up to you and what's appropriate for your situation. In this situation, the videos just were easy to do. It might not have been exactly what I would have said in the time span of the keynote, but they were short little clips that at least gave them information about the topics that they did not choose that day. So again, just trying to give you some different ideas about ways to level up, whether it's your presentation, your event, your meetings, whatever. There's usually a way to take whatever you've been doing and just make it that much more extraordinary and make it that much more engaging with just a little bit of creativity and a little bit of added effort. So if you found this tip interesting, let me know. If you've tried something like this, let me know. I'd love to hear how yours went, what you did differently. And with that, let me know if there's anything else you'd like to hear about, and I will see you next time. Bye.